Good afternoon, bookworms and flyleafs. Welcome to this week's episode of Author Reads here on Fae Productions. I am your host, Fairy Princess Lolly, and today I'm here with author Alice Ivinya. Although before we get into the stuffs, first, as you guys all know, like, subscribe. Today we're going to feather the bell, which I'm sure if you even saw our thumbnail, you know why. And if you don't, then you're about to find out pretty soon. Also, I want to give a shout out to today's show sponsor, which is Platyfly Studios. And Platyfly Studios sells fantasy-inspired clothing and accessories, all handcrafted by Kat Hawthorne in Indianapolis, Indiana. You can check out her 2021 collections in her Etsy store, which feature an assortment of gorgeous breezy skirts, many of which have pockets. And I just went to take a look at these today as well. She has a bunch of really nice, some left over from summer, but also moving into fall, has some great fall colors. And since Halloween is coming up, it's time to start planning your costume now, so you are not the last minute convention cosplayer who is still sewing at 3 a.m. in the morning before Saturday. So she also carries a variety of accessories, including mermaid gloves, dragon scale dice bags for all your clickety-clackety math rocks, and jewelry. Everything is designed with the discerning pixie in mind, and she has waistband sizing that ranges from 35 to 70 inches. So you can follow Platyfly Studios on Facebook and Instagram for information on her future sales and more. All of her information is also right there on the ticker, but also in the low bar, wherever you happen to be watching from. So you can just click the description or on YouTube, little down arrow, and find all of her links and go to her store. So with that said, thank you so much, Platyfly Studios, for being a sponsor on our show. And welcome, Alice.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's very exciting to be here.
Yes, you are most welcome. I'm glad to have you here. So I'm really excited. USA Today best-selling author. You're famous.
Yeah. Well, I wish, but yeah, no, I hit the list in February with a group of other authors in an anthology, which was very, very exciting. You know, we beat J.K. Rowling that week in America with our sales, which was quite exciting.
That is
just for that 1 week, never again. For that 1 week,
it only takes 1 week. No, that's it. 1 week, and it is there officially in your list.
Forever.
Yes, and I, looking here at your outfit, it obviously now is in your list of royal titles, right? These are the things that go below your name. That you're just collecting, so that when they introduce you, do we call you Your Majesty today?
I think I'm normally a princess, to be honest.
Oh, great. We're both Your Highness.
Princesses. Yeah, being a queen sounds like too much work.
That's what I always say, right? Once you become queen, it's nothing but work, work, work all the time. So yes, tell me a little bit about your outfit. I'm curious to know, and our colors.
Well, it's a bit of so it's my crown, which is probably going to fall off at least once during this session, and I've got a cloak which is actually a Spartan cloak. So I'm going to pretend it's a princess cloak. I stole this from my husband's dress up, but I like it. It's all billowy.
Oh, look at you! You're all dressed up.
A pirate outfit, but I was like, well, I'll put them together and become a princess.
Yes,
my pirate captain costume.
Well, it's fabulous, and I highly approve, and I am certain that everybody out there watching at home right now approves too. And if that's true, you guys, you better put like awesome thumbs or ones in the comment, like pow, 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 pow. So
I mean, you set my standards with like basic different tiara or crown every time, or your flowers. Yeah,
you know, that's a real thing. I feel like I am obliged to change my outfits for every major event that I do, so that I always look different in my pictures. So it doesn't look like I'm repeating dresses. Fortunately, mixing and matching is a thing. So it's kind of funny because like you were straightening it, and I was thinking, didn't you also get an award for a book that has to do with being an imperfect an imperfect princess, or
yeah, the Flawed Princess. Yeah,
yes, the flawed.
Yeah, no, Flawed Princess. I got a award for that in 2019 because that's when I published it. It was the Caffeinated Fantasies Coming of Age Book of the Year. And so that was the first award I ever got, which was quite exciting.
2 official titles to go behind thy royal name. So what is that book about? I know it's not the one you're reading from today, but I am curious.
So Flawed Princess is my first fantasy, and it's about a girl. She's not actually a princess, but that's, I don't want to give any spoilers. She's, well, she's got a club foot. She's born with a club foot, and she lives in a remote province in the country. And her dad basically makes a bid for the crown, which is why it's got the play on the princess. So he says, "Oh, I'm going to become king because the country doesn't acknowledge us as a province, really, and they just take all the money and all the food." But the coup goes wrong. Her dad gets beheaded, and she suddenly finds herself as basically a traitorous daughter with a club foot that's always been shut in her room her whole life, and realizes that actually she has the capability to save the whole kingdom when she's taken as a prisoner for her brother's good behavior to the capital. It's very good for that one.
I like it. I'm excited about all of these. And so tell us a little bit, if you will, about today's story that we're going to be hearing from.
Yeah, so Feathers of Snow. I have to say this one's my favourite of all the ones I've written. I don't know if I'm allowed to have a favourite because they're like your children, aren't they? But this one is my favourite. And this is a retelling of the German fairy tale, The Goose Girl. I don't know if you know that one.
I do. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. It's one of my favourite fairy tales. But in this one, I switched the role of the princess and the maid. So it's basically the maid of the princess, the lady in waiting, the princess is horrible, as you'll find out when I read. She's like absolutely horrible. She's put in an arranged marriage to a prince in another country, which she's not happy about, and she doesn't want to marry him. So because she and her lady in waiting look very similar, she basically ships a lady in waiting off to take in her stead to marry this man who doesn't sound very nice in another country, so she can go away and have fun instead of having to do an arranged marriage. And so it's about the lady in waiting having to overcome quite considerable trauma, actually, both from serving this horrible princess, but also having to then pretend to be a princess and marry someone she's never met before, who's not the nicest when they first meet. But yeah, it's great fun to write.
So it's a little kind of a Gregory Maguire swapping around of where the focus of the story is, and he's an awesome author. So I'm like, ooh, this is exciting. Now I'm curious, what has brought you to, so you have described yourself to me a little bit as doing fairy tale retellings. And so what has inspired you to do this? What got you on this little track that you're on?
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? I think they're just so much fun to write, because you can original fairy tales are so much fun. There's so much content in them, and there's often so much meaning as well, and especially how people can overcome the most ridiculous situations but still remain good in their hearts even when everyone else is horrible. I've always loved that. So my first fairy tale retelling was a retelling of The Pied Piper, which is Silent Melody. And I enjoyed that one so much. I thought, right, I'm just going to write a few fairy tale retellings and see where it takes me.
And so here you are.
Here I am. And they're my most popular books as well. So yeah.
Now this makes me curious, because a lot of old fairy tales, I've read a lot of old fairy tales, not as much as I like, but a lot. And a lot of them are, I guess when I read them, I think to myself, this grates on like the equal rights, the women's do this and the men's do that, and women's behave like this. And
Yeah.
And sometimes the morals of the stories are all about how you're supposed to be, be proper and don't talk too loud and don't, and I'm curious, when you do these retellings, how do you manage this now quite these divergent sets of moralities, right? Because we don't live in that world anymore, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, in my books, they're all but one of them actually has got a female main character, and they always start in a situation you just would not want to be in, and they all end up overcoming it and realizing that actually they've got all these strengths that they never realized they had, especially since quite a lot of my characters are differently abled. So, for example, my main character in Silent Melody is deaf, so that's how she can overcome the Pied Piper. And in the Floor Princess, she's got a club foot. And Brianna has severe PTSD as well, and flashbacks. And I think with fairy tales, the thing is that you can read them in lots of different ways. And actually, there are ways to read them where you can see that these main characters are so strong, even in a culture which maybe doesn't see men and women as completely equal. And in many ways, they can still be good role models for women to follow. And I think I always think about Cinderella as a good example of this, because when you think of Cinderella, you think, she's the woman, didn't do anything but clean, and then she goes to the ball, and then the prince saves her, and she's just waiting for him to solve all her problems. And I think there's another way of seeing it, in being that there's a girl who has so much wrong done to her, so many horrible things, but through it all she stays sort of true to herself and true to her values, and she doesn't become embittered or angry or vengeful, but she keeps on going and doing a good job and making herself proud. And it's almost like her reward for staying with this, which makes a fairy godmother appear. And I don't think it is the prince that rescues her. I think she completely rescues herself
I like this angle.
through this pushing to staying true and staying good makes the fairy godmother appear. And I think often in life, when we do just keep on pushing and don't give in to how other people try and damage us, circumstances happen in which basically our fairy godmother arrives, and we can then rescue ourselves and go to that ball. And then the prince doesn't do anything. The prince is just there. He's basically a reward.
He is.
He's not an important character at all in the story. It's all about what she manages to do by sticking true to herself. And I think this good point.
Sorry, go ahead. Yeah, I really like this perspective, because sometimes I get a little bit rankled at how poo-pooed the idea of princesses get in the modern world. And I think to myself, but that's not true. I mean, not entirely. I like your perspective. I like the perspective of, Princess Leia, right? It's not about just sitting there and doing nothing, right? There are many people in those roles, and Queen Amidala and whatever, and that have just had to go through incredible amounts of things in order to be where they are and become who they become, right? So you're right. It all is very much dependent on just how do you want to look at it? Do you want to look at it in that negative light, or do you want to look at where the good takes are? So I super love this. Okay, so today's book is Feathers of Snow. This is the one that is your most recent book.
Not quite, but I've got the release of the sequel happening next month, so it's the one that I'm most concentrating on at the moment.
Sorry, this comment made me laugh. The prince in Cinderella seems awfully obsessed with shoes.
Yeah, see, he's not important at all. He's just obsessed with the shoe. He doesn't recognize her when she's not got any makeup on. He's not the rescuer or the hero of the story.
Oh my gosh, I'm dying. It's this last weekend at Apple Bash, our two queens who were present, being not myself, took it upon themselves to make me do the dishes so that I could learn. I could learn how to properly instruct other people on how to do the dishes when I'm queen someday. At least that was their story, and they were sticking to it. So, all right. So you have a sequel that is coming out, or is
6th of October. So it's just in the final stages of editing now. I was actually just working on it just before this interview. So this book is the first in a trilogy. So the next one's out next month, and then the third one will be out in March. It's just I released a few books between book 1 and book 2, which was very naughty of me, and I shouldn't have got distracted.
Well, so wow, did you just write these all at once or something? Because March is only 6 months away. How are you putting out 2 books between now and March?
Yeah, I know, I'm a bit mad. I just keep on going. I think part of it is I just absolutely love to write, but at least I'm now not simultaneously writing 2 series, which is what I was writing 3 different series actually when I wrote this one. But yeah, it's mad because I've also got a 2-year-old, so he takes a lot of my time, and I also work as a vet 3 days a week for a charity, so I'm so busy. I don't really have the time. But
I think that maybe you actually have the Snow White magic power, and actually little forest animals, maybe. Oh, did I
just lost you for a second then?
That was, I think, on my end. So there's this thing, you have little forest animals like squirrels that come help you type. But
or more, I just never ever clean the house. It's probably
and
more accurate.
There's also that. That's what I want. Forest animals to clean. Okay, so I am going to quit talking now. I'm going to turn the screen over to you here in just a second. For everybody watching at home, you guys, I am going to be in the comment section with you on mute while Alice is reading to us, and I'll be taking your questions when she's done reading. We will pose the questions to her, and then, of course, we will do our drawing for the book at the end of the show. So are you ready? Are you ready? Here we go.
Yeah. I'm going to take my crown off because otherwise it's going to fall off right in the middle, and that will be very distracting.
Your Highness, you are always a princess, even if you're wearing your invisible crown.
Brilliant. So I'm reading from Feathers of Snow, and I'm going to read the prologue and chapter 1, and hopefully I'll read it all right and not stumble over my own words that I've written. So this is the prologue. Once upon a time, the world was a wilder place than it is today. The forests were ruled by the mighty wolf Salhadar, the plains by the beautiful white horse Tamunden, the air by the enormous eagle Thramban, and the water by the black whale Beulah. Everything was at peace and in balance. Humans were few, and each lived in one of the 4 tribes, following the guidance of the land, and the law of the beasts was in their blood. But then a new race of humans came from across the sea. They were shorter-lived and small in stature. They could not feel the power of the land, nor see the balance of nature. The land collapsed into war as the new race wished to twist all to its purpose. Their numbers grew and grew. After decades of fighting, the beasts and old humans were left with a choice: learn to live alongside the new race and teach them to curb their appetite, or upset the balance of power to make themselves strong enough to resist them. The land was torn in 2. In the south, man and beast learned to live together, and the power of the land dwindled beneath human rule. To the frozen north, the beasts and the old men resisted and fed off deep, forbidden magic. And so the power of nature dwindled, and the age of beasts ended. Chapter 1, a devastating proposal. Governess Rosa pointed at her blackboard and the endless list of names scribbled across it. Beside me, Princess Eliana was already looking out of the window with a vacant expression. She flicked her quill and scattered ink across a butterfly, battering its wings at the glass. She repeated the motion until the wings were steeped in black. Lady Brianna, Governess Rosa said, already having given up with Eliana. Can you remember which of the nobility belonged to the old blood and which tribes their ancestors were in? Eliana snorted. What does it matter? Nobody cares about the old blood. It doesn't mean anything anymore. Her eyes didn't leave the butterfly, now struggling under the unexpected weight of its wings. It brushed black smears over the glass. The governess ignored her, and I sighed, listing the nobles I knew in Siberia, with the white hair and tall stature of Thrumban's tribe, myself and Eliana included, and those I knew with the blue-black hair of Bula. The borderland nobility is mostly of Salhadar, and there are some of Tamundan's tribe there too, though they mostly rule Killamore. I hoped the vague statement would pass, rather than trying to scan the list of names for people from distant countries that I would never meet for any that I recognised. Governess Rosa seemed pleased enough and smiled at me. I wished she realised the more she favoured me and ignored Eliana, the more annoyed and embittered the princess became. And Eliana was in even more of a foul mood than normal, knowing the court were discussing her marriage prospects today. The governess thought the kindness of reward would motivate both of us, but Eliana hated anyone being praised over her. I gave the governess a blank expression as an attempt to discourage her. The governess didn't seem to notice and bent to unfurl our essays from last week. Eliana had given up on hers early and left me to finish it for her. Over the years, I'd learnt a good impression of her handwriting. I have finished going through your papers on the relationship between poverty and unrest in Jalava. I sat up straighter. Jalava was the province owned by my family. Though I'd been sent here to the capital of Hava when I was very young to be lady-in-waiting to Eliana, I still wanted to learn as much as possible about my homeland. After severe flooding, Jalava was on the verge of another potato famine, and I wanted to understand how I might help the situation. It was my hope that after Eliana was wed in a few weeks, I would be released from service and able to return home. The thought sent a thrill of excitement through me. What would it be like to be surrounded by my own family and able to follow my own desires and interests rather than Eliana's? Governess Rosa continued to smile as she scanned my essay. You make some very good points, Lady Brianna. Your reading is impressive. However, there are one or two areas I feel we could discuss further. I nodded, picking up my quill. Eliana hated reading, and it was close to impossible to study in her company, meaning I had to snatch the moments I could. It would be much easier to learn from the governess than it had been from books. I leant forward to show I was listening. Governess Rosa pointed to a paragraph. What you say here about the potato rising of... Eliana interrupted. Who do you think they will choose for me to marry, Governess Rosa? She tilted her chin up as she regarded our teacher. My heart sank. Couldn't she hold on for just half an hour more before disrupting the lesson? This was about the people I would help govern one day, and they desperately needed help. The governess paled, recognising the look in the princess's eyes. Well, it's hard for me to say. There are quite a few eligible young noblemen. I suspect the court will prioritise our relationship with Killamore. As you know, their new king is wanting to expand their borders, and we don't quite have the military they have. I started to doodle galloping horses, imagining myself riding on Faladar's back through the gardens. I drew his magnificent tail and mane streaming in the wind. I didn't want to be part of this discussion. Eliana narrowed her eyes at our teacher. You think they'll marry me to the King of Killamore? The governess shifted and clenched her hands together. Well, I wouldn't go that far. He is very powerful. I mean, I couldn't possibly presume to know what... You don't know anything, she finished and stood up abruptly. I need air. The governess bowed. Of course, Your Highness. I can continue the lesson with... Brianna, attend me, she snapped. I laid down my pen and gave an apologetic smile to the governess. If she had praised Eliana and ignored my work, she might have lasted longer. At the window, the butterfly gave a final limp flutter against the glass. Eliana was already striding from the study, and I trudged behind her, hoping I might be able to have the lesson another time. It was hard to predict what I would be able to do at the best of times, let alone today. My whole life dangled from Eliana's whims, and I knew better than to upset her. Soon, so soon, she would be married, and I could ask to be freed from her service. I would have lessons in my own home in Jalava, with nobody to interrupt. I could train in the dueling ring as much as I wanted and ride all afternoon. But I wouldn't have Faladar. Not unless Eliana gave him up, which would never happen. He was my happiness, and I wasn't sure how I would cope with losing him. Eliana stalked to her rooms, her face dark. She wasn't normally this quiet. What's wrong? I asked, quickening my pace. She was probably waiting for me to ask. She scowled at me. Don't be ridiculous, Bria. You know what's wrong. I chewed my lip, a flicker of fear sparking in my stomach. I'd said the wrong thing. It'd been years since she had hit me or devised one of her punishments, but I could never shake the instinctive fear she had ingrained in me as a child. I'm sure your parents will consult you about it. Maybe you'll have a few options. I attempted a smile. It might be fun. Imagine all the lords and princes who will come to Harvard to compete for your hand. She made a disgusted noise in her throat. Father will propose something stupid, I am sure, as if I would marry just anyone. She swished her trailing silk skirts angrily as she walked. I laid a hand gently on her arm. There's no use worrying about possibilities. Why not? She hit my hand away. Oh, just stop talking. You're not helping. I took a step back and fell silent, leaving her to her self-inflicted torment. I hoped she would dismiss me soon so I could rearrange a private lesson with the governess, or if I was too late to catch her, spar with the weapons master. Truth was, I didn't care who she married if it meant I could leave here. Whatever man got her, I wished him luck. We reached Eliana's room, and she snapped at the maids who were still making her bed, so they scurried out. She collapsed onto her velvet couch and looked at the clock. Is it lunchtime yet? I'm famished. I could ask the kitchens to bring something early. Ask them for soup, but not as salty as last time. And that bread with the brown seeds, you know, the crusty one. I nodded and left to find a maid. Why had she scared them off rather than asking one herself? As I turned a corner in the corridor, I was faced with Queen Geraldina striding towards me in a blood-red gown, her face pale. Chiffon and silk wafted behind her like wings. I dropped into a curtsy. She nodded. Where's my daughter, Brianna? Her tone was strained. In her room. I was just fetching her some food. Leave that. Follow me. I sighed internally and followed the Queen. From her posture, she didn't have good news. She opened the princess's door without knocking and sat down next to her daughter. Eliana froze, and her eyes went wide at her mother's expression. I slipped to the back of the room and hoped I would be ignored. The Queen took her daughter's hands. The court is proposing a match for you, darling. Prince Gian of the Borderlands. I blinked as I processed the words. The Borderlands? I wasn't expecting them to consider such a wild, dangerous place. The royal family there didn't have the best reputation either. They were known for violence, a people of war who kept to themselves. What? Eliana shook her head, her long white hair whipping the back of the couch. You can't marry me to a crazed murderer, and so far from home. Mama, you must stop this at once. The Queen patted her daughter's hands. Your father hasn't approved it yet. The decision won't be finalised until tomorrow. I will oppose the council and we'll try to come up with some much more sensible suggestions. He's not even the eldest son. No, Mama, you must stop this talk at once. Why not marry me to the Killimore king? I would be the most powerful woman on the continent. She sighed and tilted her head. Darling, Killimore are traditionally our enemy, and they have such little honour they might attack us anyway. She rose and smoothed out the gauzy layers of her overskirt. I will stop the match and ask for one more suitable. Now try not to fret, dear. Brianna will look after you. The Queen gave me a meaningful look and glided out of the room. Eliana turned to me with a thunderous expression. Did you tell them about my soup? No, Good, because I feel ill. Tell the maids no food is to be brought in here and I'm not to be disturbed. She collapsed back and lay with her arms folded, scowling at the ceiling. I nodded, my mood rising at the thought of being dismissed. As you wish. Then come back here and read to me. My heart sank again. As always, I did as she asked. Ever since she had trapped me in that barrel when we were 10, I didn't dare do otherwise. I swallowed down the roughness in my throat, remembering the darkness and the cramps that still invaded my dreams. The next day, Princess Eliana paced up and down her bedroom, biting her nails and letting out groans of frustration. Cushions were strewn across the floor, and the contents of her jewellery box was scattered in glittering heaps in the thick carpet. She kicked a necklace at her floor-length mirror, and I winced as diamonds struck glass. Why is Mama not back yet? What could they possibly be talking about? They have had all of yesterday, and now it's almost midday. I ignored my pounding headache and longed to leave and curl up quietly with a book. I was becoming snappy with exhaustion and hunger, but Eliana was showing no signs of relenting. I took a step towards her, making a calming motion with my hands. Please calm down, Eliana. Even if they do marry you to that prince, he would have to treat you well for fear of angering your parents. She glared at me, burying her fists in her blue skirts and swishing them in frustration. It's all right for you, Bria. If I get sent off to a distant land to marry a monster, you can just stay here. You don't care. She collapsed onto the bed and held off the remaining cushion. You have no idea how lucky you are being able to marry whoever you want. I suppressed a sigh and stole a look out the window. It was a beautiful day and the garden was soaked in sunlight. The flowers were just coming into full bloom and I longed to be surrounded by their heady scent in peace and calm along with a very large lunch. Eliana hadn't let me leave all night and had continued to refuse food for both of us. Didn't she understand that this was always going to happen? There had always been a political marriage awaiting her. This was the price for her life of privilege and luxury. Our country badly needed the protection of an alliance now that Killimore had its new restless ruler. The borderlands had a strong military, valued familial loyalty, and were a sensible choice politically. Her marriage could save thousands of lives and perhaps the kingdom itself. Not that I envied her. Eliana let out another groan and tugged out her hairpin, still lying down, then threw it at the wall where stones scattered from their settings. I took a deep breath and went to gather them up before she could tell me off for losing any. It's ridiculous, she hissed at the ceiling. I wouldn't even become queen. Surely my station is above second sons. I don't want to languish on the edge of nowhere. The rebellious part of me wanted to point out that she was the third eldest on her part. Instead, I made my voice as soothing as possible. Come, Highness, let me sort out your hair. I tugged her up from the bed and sat her in front of the mirror where she pouted at her reflection. I pretended not to notice as she smudged the kohl under her green eyes to make it look like she'd been crying. If I managed to keep her calm for long enough, maybe she would decide she was exhausted and take a nap. Then I could finally leave for food and possibly even hide and read with Falador in the stables. He would be missing me as much as he always denied it. I was still brushing Eliana's snow-white hair, the princess blessedly silent, when Queen Geraldina flung open the doors, making us both jump. Her own pale hair was piled on top of her head in the intricate way she favoured for state meetings, and she wore an authoritative midnight blue gown. Her bold makeup didn't hide the shadows under her eyes or the gauntness of her cheeks. The queen flung her hands into the air as she spoke. Your father's gone mad. The whole council has gone mad. Eliana's skin grew so pale it was almost translucent, and her eyes rounded with horror. Mama? She didn't rise, but held out a hand to the queen, whose own eyes filled with tears. She hurried over to her daughter and buried her head into her breast. I took a step back towards the window, trying to give them privacy as my heart thudded in my ears. Eliana was not going to cope well with this. You mean you're actually going to marry me to that man? Sobbed Eliana into her mother's dress. There was an edge of shock to her voice that for the first time in her life, her tantrum wasn't enough to get her own way. Why haven't you stopped it? He will hurt me and kill me. You will never see me again, and it will be Papa's fault and yours for not stopping him. The queen brushed her hand through Eliana's hair and hushed her. Now, it won't be as bad as all that. I didn't know your father well before I married him, and in some ways it was quite exciting. Your husband wasn't a beast, she almost screamed. They're of Salhadar, monsters that live to kill Mama. The crown prince killed his wife in a fit of rage. Everyone knows that. His brother will now kill me, and you'll get nothing more than a delayed letter saying it was all a horrible accident. The queen sighed, but couldn't hide the quiver from her voice. Now, darling, that's nonsense. You are quite capable of defending yourself, but you won't need to. What if he's nothing like his brother? It may be nothing but rumours, and the crown prince's wife was just a borderlander girl anyway. If he hurt you in any way, a foreign princess, there would be war, and they can't risk that. Eliana rocked back from the queen and flung herself away. Father won't let us ride to war, even if they killed me, and you know it. We don't have enough men to match the borderlands, and that's the whole reason you're marrying me off as a sacrifice. They're monsters, all of them. They're not even human. Darling, they're just as human as us, remember. He's as much a beast as you are a bird. The old blood means little these days. Besides, it's good for royalty to have some of the old blood. He'll live for longer, and so will your children. Her voice was soft, but her eyes were wide with panic. Her mouth sagged with hopelessness. The princess ignored her, sobs breaking up her words. They say it is cold all the time, and you never see the sun. The land is nothing but ice and snow and mountains. The pass between our countries becomes impassable every winter. If they do hurt me, I'll be trapped with no way home. Oh, Eliana, the queen pulled her sobbing daughter into a fierce hug. I pressed my hand against my throbbing temples, considered slipping out of the room and taking a break, leaving the princess to her mother. A few minutes of quiet with a cup of tea, a sandwich and some exercise would make the afternoon much easier to manage. The princess wasn't going to calm down any time soon. I lowered my hand and the queen's eyes snapped to me at the movement. Her eyes narrowed and then widened, and her lips parted as she continued to stare at me. I took a step back at the intense expression and lowered my gaze. They'd never know, she breathed. Eliana raised her head and frowned at her mother before following her gaze to me. Her swollen features brightened. Yes! She stood and clapped her hands together, a smile twisting her lips. Oh, you're so clever, Mama! Our knees knotted my belly, and my heart started to pound, worsening my headache. The queen put a warning hand on her daughter's shoulder. We would need to think this through carefully, Eliana, and not get carried away. Both of them studied me again with hungry gazes, and I felt my unease shift to horror. My chest tightened, and I parted my lips to make it easier to breathe. You can't seriously be thinking about sending me instead. Eliana placed her hands on her hips. Why not? We have the same hair colour, and you have enough of the old blood, if not quite of my pedigree. You're almost thin enough, and you would just not have to eat for a while. No one from the borderlands has seen me since I was little, so they wouldn't know the difference. You could go in my place, marry that prince, save the kingdom, and we'll have peace. Meanwhile, I'll stay here, and they'll be none the wiser. I gaped at her, shaking my head slowly. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. But the whole court will know you're here. The borderlands will find out sooner rather than later, and they would kill me and declare war on you for tricking them. The queen glided over and took my hands in her ice-cold fingers. Now, Brianna, I know this is a lot to think about, but if this plan was successful, you would be serving not only your mistress, but the whole kingdom. And just think about it. This is the marriage of your dreams. It would hugely benefit you. You would live the rest of your life as a princess, wealthy, privileged. Most girls in your position could only dream of such advancement. I pulled my hands from hers, my horror thickening at the words, and the plan I could see forming behind her eyes. They'll find out and kill me. I tried to sound as assertive as I dared. The queen narrowed her eyes and firmed her blood-red lips. Not if you play your part well. You have been with my daughter since before you can remember. You have attended every lesson with her, and I should hope you know as much as she about etiquette, politics, and the borderlands. You have the white hair of the noble family, showing you have the blood. And you look pretty enough. They know next to nothing about Eliana, and people travel between the kingdoms infrequently. They are not a country for complicated politics and care more about honour and loyalty. They would not naturally suspect. I sat down heavily on the bed, my head whirling. But Eliana will still be here. Everyone will know. I'm a fake, and word would reach them eventually. The queen tapped a finger against her lips. Eliana can disappear to the winter hunting palace. She turned to her daughter and reached out her hands. You would have to give up your title, darling, and stay away from the capital, but I'm sure we can find you a marriage you approve of away from court. You could be one of my cousin's daughters. Nobody can keep track of her brood, and I'll visit as often as I can. But I'll still be treated like a princess, of course. Eliana started to pace excitedly. Does this mean I won't have to do so many lessons? But I could take all my things, couldn't I? And all the servants. If I must disappear from court, I'd much rather it be to the hunting palace than a savage country days of travel away where I'd never see you. The queen nodded. Of course you could take your things, but you would have to give Brianna your ring with the royal seal. The princess pulled the ring from her finger with reluctance and watched the engraved opal sparkle in the light before shoving it into my hand. See if it fits, commanded the queen. With a growing sense of hopeless inevitability, I slipped it onto my forefinger, where it nestled comfortably at the base. The Queen grinned in triumph, as if this settled the whole affair. I tugged the ring back off. But what of me? What of my parents? Eliana waved a hand in the air. We'll just tell them you're dead. We could say it was an accident and send them some money in compensation. They barely see you anyway. I took a step towards her, my panic reaching new heights. What? No, that would break their hearts. Queen Geraldina rested a calming hand on my shoulder. We'll merely tell them you accompanied the princess to the borderlands to continue as her lady-in-waiting. You can still write to them. Your father is often at court, and I'll keep an eye out for their welfare, if you cooperate. I will even add a few acres to their estate in Jalava, maybe some soldiers to help clear the damage from the recent floods. The last potato harvest was so poor due to the rains. The whole region is in desperate need of some financial support. I will provide that in return for your services. My insides ran cold. And what if I don't? The Queen's painted eyebrows slanted down. Surely you can see this is for the good of everyone, dear Brianna. Of course, as you said, if you reveal your identity once you're in the borderlands, they will kill you for pretending to be the princess. In the meantime, well, I'll see to it that you're taken straight there with strict instructions to the guards. I'll send a letter to your parents asking them to join us in Hava with your brother, where I can look after them. If you even think about running away, I will try them in court for not taking more precautions to protect their people from the floods. Many people lost their lives and houses, I heard. I paled and my voice sounded small. You couldn't. The entire river flooded. They can't be responsible for that. She raised her eyebrows. Couldn't I? It would be very convenient for me to lay that mess at their feet. She reached out to stroke my arm. But I won't, because I know that what you're doing for our country in Eliana. They will receive all the funding they need, and we will stop another potato famine. No more people need to die if you do as I say. I opened my mouth to protest further, but no words came out. How could I reason with such madness? And the people of Jalava needed support so badly. And my parents? Part of me screamed against my silence. This was the one time I needed to draw a line and stand up against them, but I knew it was useless. It would only make things worse. That's where I'm going to stop.
I am back. So was that just the prologue, or that was the prologue?
No, that was sorry. The prologue's very short. The prologue was just like the oldie English little backstory about spirit beasts. So can't find the screen now.
Yeah, there you go.
Was just the prologue. It was very short, and then the rest was chapter 1.
All right. Well, okay, so that was awesome, and basically we were all riveted while you were reading. We do have a couple few questions here. I myself, I'm curious, just in listening to this, I guess to me it sounds so different than reading what would be written by an American. Right?
Really, that's really interesting.
I feel like the many things that you have described, well, because we don't have a history in America of living underneath royal classes, that just is not a part of, as you of course know, we're still the new world over here, right? We're still the grand experiment. And so so I find your descriptions of what they are doing as nobles really very fascinating comparatively, because you describe them as reading these essays and trying to be up to knowledgeable and up to speed on what's going on with crops and famines and the various politics of the countries. And I'm curious, I guess, how is this just a thing that you're able to write about because it's kind of ingrained in British culture, or to know that these are the kinds of things that the nobles were supposed to do? Not sure that they actually did, but that was kind of what their role was, with relation to governance of the land, right?
Yeah. Oh, it's an interesting question because it's so hard to tell how much your culture reflects on you until someone points it out. I think it is quite natural for me to write about, partly because I've read epic fantasy since for a very, very young age, especially quite political epic fantasy, which has probably impacted me in those areas. Things like Robert Jordan and Brandon Sanderson. So I think that's probably impacted that. And I suppose just I had a love for history as well growing up, especially like the Tudors and the Stuarts, things like that. So I think that's probably impacted it massively as well. Just learning what it's like to live as a Tudor or as a real princess or queen. Yeah.
I don't know. I liked hearing it quite a lot. And this is funny. Thank you, Alicia, by the way, for your contribution. And because of that, I told you that your question could go first. So here we go. What is your favorite type of potato?
That is a very hard question.
I know they're all so good.
Does it have to be the type of potato, or can it be how I eat the potato? Because I don't think I care about what type of potato is, as long as it's been made into a chip. Or do you call them chips? You call them French fries or something, don't you, in America?
You guys call French fries chips, and
French fries, the little skinny chips.
You call chips crisp.
Yeah. Well, I love fries. Can I say sweet potato fries? That's good. Let's make everyone happy.
Yes, we just had sweet potato with dinner last night. So
I love sweet potato, actually. It's really good, especially when it's been made all unhealthy and deep fried and everything else.
But a sweet potato isn't actually a potato, is it? Is it?
Oh, I'm definitely counting that as a potato. Definitely.
I have no idea. They're both roots, though. At least we know that. You know who I bet would know if Newton File is out there. I bet he would know whether or not a sweet potato and a potato are.
Yeah, but I love all types of potato, like mashed potato, baked potato, chips, crisps, whatever you call them. They're all amazing. You can never take potatoes out of my life.
Oh, here we go. And cookies are biscuits. Well, what do you call a biscuit if a cookie is a biscuit?
I get very confused because you guys say things like biscuits and gravy, and then I get really confused because I'm like, why would you put a biscuit in gravy?
Well, because we mean an actual biscuit, not a cookie.
Yeah, for us, a biscuit is like, I suppose, a small cookie, and a cookie is like a biscuit that's over that big. But I don't know what you guys put in your gravy. None of it makes sense to me.
What about English muffins? Are those English? Neither English nor muffin.
That's no idea what an English muffin is.
Oh, it's like a little, it's like a little sourdough. I don't know, bakery. I don't know. It's a sourdough thing, and you cut them in half, and you just put them in the toaster.
Okay, we do not do that. That is not English. Take the English out of that time.
Oh no, they're as English as French fries are French.
I mean, to us, a muffin is like a big cupcake. That's what we call muffins.
Yes, that is what we call muffins too.
Yeah, we don't have any sourdough muffins.
No, English muffins are the most unmuffin muffins that we have. They're not actually anything like what an actual muffin would be.
I feel like we've been coined wrongly here. There's definitely no other muffin.
I wanted to say scone, and scone is wrong. They're almost like if you were a crumpet. You know what a crumpet looks like? How it's got kind of like the holes, the bubbly thing on top.
Yeah.
If you cut an English muffin in half, that's sort of what it looks like. Is like a crumpet. But
I've never seen one of these. I'll have to look it up after. I'll have to Google it.
I have to Google English muffin. What is this thing?
This is not English.
That's awesome. I want to see that in one of your future books, right? Where your character goes off to another land and finds out that the other land has something named for their homeland, right? Like,
yeah, and all the confusion with the food.
you don't eat this where I came from. What are you talking about?
Yeah. I mean, this is why I could, because most of my audience are American, and this is why I could never write contemporary things, because I would just get it wrong. Every sentence, there would be something that didn't make sense to an American that was really English.
So here we go. So see, I told you, Newt knows all these things. So English muffins are from The Art of Cookery by Hannah Glass, which is British. I don't know who Hannah Glass is.
Maybe it was one of those things where no one in England wanted them, but they can hit off in America. Who knows? I've never heard of them. I'll have a look out. I'll see if I can get hold of them in England and experience an English muffin.
I am definitely
it doesn't sound as good as cake. I'd rather eat a cake muffin, but I'll try it.
A cake muffin sounds fabulous. Let's see. So there was another question here. Here we go. When crafting one of these retellings, do you search? Wait, I don't know what the word treat means there. I think that's a typo, Newt. Do you search more original versions and add new detail, settings, characters, or do you start anew from the kernel of a lesson?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. It depends a little bit. So the two retellings that I've done really are Silent Melody, which is the Pied Piper, and Feathers of Snow, which is the Goose Girl. So from the Pied Piper, I did quite, because you might not know, but the Pied Piper is actually based on a real story. And in 1834, I think it was, 130 children went missing from the German town of Hamelin. And that really happened. And no one knows, there's lots of theories about crusades and plagues and cults and everything, but nobody knows why these children went missing. But it's still recorded in their
it's giving me like goosebumps. That I had no idea, and that is really creepy.
Yeah, and it still very much affects the town today. So they have a street where you're not allowed to play music in honor of these missing children. And then so the story of the Pied Piper came up from this. And then 100 years later, when the Black Death, which is the disease, bubonic plague spread by rats, when that swept through Europe, the rats were added to the story later. So the original Pied Piper wouldn't have had rats in it. It would have just had this mysterious man taking these children away. Normally it includes under a mountain. So in that one, it's great because it's a setup to a story where I could be almost completely true to the original, which is a random man comes and chants the children musically and takes them away. And then no one knows what happened. So then I can write all the rest myself. And so it's one where the original myth doesn't dictate the story that much. It just sets it up because the actual story doesn't have an ending. It's a mystery. So it starts in Hamelin. It starts in the real place. It starts in Germany, and then it's a portal fantasy where they go under the mountain. I think as well, when tales are this old, you have loads of different versions. So I quite like to pick little bits from each one as little references or Easter eggs that people can catch up. But it doesn't mean there's a lot of freedom to it as well, where you're allowed in fairy tales to miss out things or slightly change things as long as the essence of the story is the same. So the Pied Piper, I just let it set me up with the beginning. With the Goose Girl, there's so many retellings of the Goose Girl that I absolutely love, and I didn't want to take away from that. So I wanted to take because I loved it as a child, there's certain scenes that really stuck with me from reading it as a child, and those scenes I wanted to have in it. But I also wanted to completely make it my own by switching the princess and the maid the other way around, so that the original Goose Girl story is sort of like, actually, no, I'm not going to give it away. But and so we've got it's very different. And I've also made a lot of the characters Asian and experimented with the culture clash and things like that, which is great fun. But I wanted to keep in most of the retellings of the Goose Girl, the main character has so much wrong happen to her, as I was saying earlier, and yet she stays true to herself and stays like a really nice person, whereas the baddie is just like the worst, most horrible person ever. And I love that clash of being really dark and really sinister and quite brutal, which the maid is in the original. Like she wants to put the princess in a barrel of nails and drag her through the town. And you've also got like very vicious things like the talking horse head that's been murdered, hung above the gate.
Yeah.
Really dark. And I love having that darkness and that twistedness and like quite grimness, like juxtapositioned with someone who's actually really quite innocent and good, and how that innocence is, can make them weak but also can make them strong. And I love that. I love that play of it all, just darkness and light and all that stuff that there is in fairy tales.
I like how it's just so casually written in there. Yes, we'll just put you in a barrel full of nails.
It was actually something that really influenced my whole plot, because this one line, because I was like, that line has been in my head ever since I read it. I was probably traumatized as like a 10-year-old by that line of dragging a woman in a barrel of nails until dead. So I was like, I need this line to not come out of nowhere. I need to make a baddie who would say that sort of thing and it'd be consistent with her character. And that actually dictated a huge amount of the plot, just so that this one line didn't come out of nowhere. And then a lot of the plot was also dictated by the fact you've got a talking horse. And I love world building. So I was like, no, I need to justify and like make it all make sense why I have a talking horse. I think those are the challenges of making a fairy tale retelling into a book, because I wanted to have these facts from the original whilst it made sense within my world.
So I can confirm on the Pied Piper business, as somebody who does play the flute, that if you play the flute around small children, they begin to gather and coalesce, and then you can just get them to follow you like do 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 do, and then they go. Maybe it's a fairy thing. I'm not entirely sure, but it works. I've done it. I mean, not led them off into.
Yeah, maybe don't lead them into a wood, into a cave in the mountain, never to return. Because
more like in a parade or procession. But speaking of world building, now a little bit about that. Oh, gosh, is it 3? Oh my gosh, it's 3:00 already. I didn't even notice the time. Well, obviously, as you can see, we don't pumpkin at 3. So I'm curious, though, about your world building. How do you go about doing that? Do you do all of your world building up front, or do you do it as you go along? Like, what's that look like?
Yeah, I think often I have an idea of how I want a place to feel. And I do a lot of my world building on feelings, and trying to fit the feeling with the storytale and the arc that the character goes through. So, for example, in Feathers of Snow, I wanted a really wintry, really cold, quite threatening feel to the world, to be a juxtaposition to Brianna's innocence and naivety. And it's quite sinister in places, but not gruesome. Though it's maybe a little bit more gruesome in the sequel. I might be told by my editor to tone it down. I'm waiting to see that. But that's the problem with being a vet. Sometimes I just forget that everyone doesn't have blood spray at them every day, and it's a bit squeamish. Yeah, so I normally have a feeling, and then I have my points, which I know I want to include. So if it's a fairy retelling, I'll have those points like I've just thought about, like I want a baddie to do that, and I want a world where I can justify having a talking horse. And then a lot of it I do as I go, because I find that helpful in the fact that I try and create a lot of mystery, and I'm better at creating mystery when I don't always know the answers myself until the end of the book, and then I'll go back and write foreshadowing for it, and that just means that I make the big reveals at the right places in the pacing. Yeah, that's my secret, is that when you're wondering the question, I'm sometimes wondering the question too as I go along. But I think if J.R. Tolkien got away with that, I can get away with that too.
It's funny that you say that, because one of the things that I always think when I read books with just really clever characters, like some problem to be solved or whatever, And I remember saying this one time. Oh, by the way, guys, like now put your name into the comments now if you want to be entered to win a copy of the book. I'm putting you all on the wheel of win right now as I see them come through. But one of the things that I always think to myself is, man, I wish I could be as smart as this character. I wish I could be, I wish I could be as brilliant as Tyrion Lannister or whatever. And one day a friend of mine said, the author just makes that up. The character isn't actually brilliant. The author is the one writing the book, and they can just go back and change the things to make the character like have been, had that foresight or whatever. And I'm like, yeah, that's true. But, like I get caught up in the timeline of the book, right? Not looking behind the curtain. So it's funny that you say that, because I always think, yeah, that makes perfect sense. Like just kind of write it. And then after you know what your plot is, you go back and you can put in the things that you want to sort of be like, this is where a person maybe had the clue, or this is where, we found that the candlestick had not been set back exactly in the right place, or whatever. Okay, so are we ready to do our drawing for today? Uh-oh, did I lose you?
Oh, sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
I thought it was a question to the listeners, not to me.
No, I have been collecting names actually, because I forgot to say a little earlier, so I put it in the comments. And so I've been collecting the names here. We've got the names, and we've got our Patreon patrons on the list, and our YouTube members are on the list for the Wheel of Win, which I will pull up right here. And today's drawing is for...
I'm battery. Let me plug my computer in. Just to add to the suspense. There we go. Adding to the suspense.
All right. And so today's drawing is for a copy of Feathers of Snow.
Yeah.
Oh, Feathers of Snow. Like goosey, feathery, downy.
Yeah.
Down.
Goose girl. Yeah.
I got it. I was a little slow on that uptake, but I figured it out on my own without being told.
It's like that moment in a book where you suddenly realize why it's called the title, and you're like, I found the line which is in the title or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, that's basically what just happened in my head. Okay, well then here we go. I see no more in our comments, so these are everybody is now on the list.
I'm loving these names. They're fantastic.
Oh, yes. I invite everybody to use their magical, fantastical persona, whatever, their cool name that they want. Alterum, congratulations. You are the winner of today's book, and she will be so very happy, I think, to hear that. So it was one of our regular Patreon patrons and Discord participants. So
I think you like it. I think you enjoy it.
For all I know, one of us may try to finagle it off of her, right? So where am I looking? I'm looking for this right here. Yay! All right. Is there anything that you would like to say to us before we let you go this afternoon?
I don't think so particularly. You can get all my books on Amazon. All the Alice Ivinya ones are on Kindle Unlimited, apart from some of my short stories. And my short stories are generally in anthologies where all the money goes to charity. So you can also check those out. But yeah, just thank you so much for listening to me. And I just really value everyone's time and any support at all. It's always lovely because I just love writing and I love to continue to write. Yeah,
let's make it happen. Yes, so you guys know how this works. Find her on Instagram, on Facebook. Give the follows, the loves, the likes, and if you buy the book, please leave a review for it once you have.
That'd be lovely. I always do a happy dance when I get a review.
Yes,
a little dance around the room.
Do you actually? Because now I feel like that needs to be on TikTok or something, right? Just like.
Yeah, maybe I should record every review I get doing a little dance.
Right. This is my review happy dance. Well, thank you so much for joining us. It must be
Thank you
quite
for
late where you
listening.
are. It must be, what, midnight where you are?
Almost. It's just gone 11, so not quite. So yeah, I've got a little while before I turn into a pumpkin.
All right. Well, careful there then, Cinderella. So, all right. Thank you so much for joining us today, everybody. And today being Friday, I will see you guys again then on next Wednesday for Fae News. So have a happy weekend, everybody, and we will see you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Hello, friends. This is Gone for Hammerhands. Thank you for checking out Fairy Princess Lolly's channel. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like and subscribe button. Use your troll hammer to ring that little bell icon to get notifications when she posts future videos. And if you'd like to support these magical creations, fly over to our Patreon and join the fairy family.